So many drugs are also tested for the relief of anxiety, and drugs that relieve anxiety are known as anxiolytic drugs. Anxiolytic drugs relieve anxiety, and they include drugs like the benzodiazepines, right? The barbiturates, alcohol, acute alcohol. As long as you're not dependent on alcohol, can also, to some extent relieve anxiety. And many of these drugs share action at a very specific receptor, the GABA A receptor. GABA is the primary inhibitory neurotransmitter in the brain, and the GABA A receptor mediates that fast inhibitory response. It is an ionotropic or a ligand gated channel. So the GABA binds, or the anxiolytic drug binds to the GABA A receptor. It switches open a channel that lets chloride ions enter the cell and hyperpolarizes, the neuron, and shifts it, even farther away from the threshold of -55 for the initiation of an action potential. So tests that sort of measure anxiety include something called the elevated plus maze. Very interesting kind of contraption. It's a plus maze, so like a cross, elevated, so it's off the ground. This is for testing rodents typically, and there's a central point where where the arms cross, and you put the rodents there, and two of the arms have kind of plexiglass walls along the side, so they are safer. You can't fall off as easily. While the other two are just open arms. So there's the closed arms and the open arms, and you can look at how likely are animals to go into the open arms versus the closed arms as a measure of their level of anxiety. And if they're anxious, they'll tend to stay on the closed arms more than they do on the open arms. But if you give them a drug like alcohol, they'll just sort of waltz out onto the open arms, and you can measure the amount of time, relative amount of time spent in the open versus the closed arms as a measure of anxiety. Another kind of related task is based on sort of the behavioral preferences of rodents. They tend to like darker spaces. They feel safer sort of in darker spaces. And if they are, anxious, they'll spend more time in a dark compartment that may be connected to a much brighter, compartment. However, if they get a drug like a benzodiazepine, like, diazepam or Valium, and their anxiety is relieved, and the brain is sort of calm to some extent, they'll actually venture out more into the light compartments. You can measure the relative amounts of time, spent in these two compartments as another measure, behavioral